let me now just introduce our, I think, great admirer that I am of hers. Right? When I think of Linda Whetstone, the first thing that comes to my mind is the Mont Pelerin meeting that we had hosted in Goa. Right? Just as the nerds we are, we had packed the whole day with programs. There was no time to visit the beach at all, even though it was very close by to the hotel. Now, after dinner, I remember some of us sort of began walking around towards the beach. And who do I see swimming in the sea? Linda Whetstone. At 10:30 at night, she was all by herself swimming in the sea at Goa, right? And we were still sort of trying to just walk on the beach at that point in time. And Linda, you have always been an inspiration for me. I think you have been inspiration for many, many people in this movement. Right? I also remember seeing you at so many of the conferences, right? Where you are like the force of nature, right? Meeting people, talking to them, inspiring them, giving them ideas, right? What they can do, what you can do for them, right? And on the top of all of that, and this is really, I think, what sort of moves me the most, that you attend some sessions, you find time to attend those sessions, and sit down in those rooms just like anybody else, and try to learn new things, even though I doubt there are many new things that you have not heard before that people are talking about, right? But I have seen you so engagingly, so movingly, sort of talking about what people are doing in that room, right? And genuinely excited about the new things that people are thinking about, new things they are talking about, new sort of visions they have, new ambitions they have, and always there to champion them. Right? And so it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce you the Lady of Liberty, Linda Whetstone.
Thank you very much, Parth. It's my great honor, of course, to be asked to speak at your Founders Day. 20 odd years ago, when you started up, I couldn't have imagined 23 years in the future, it would have seemed just too long. And I would have never thought ever that I would have been speaking as your first outside speaker on that day. But here I am. It's wonderful to be with you. The only thing that could give me more pleasure is that we could have all been together in person, but that's going to wait for another time. CCS has a really special place in my heart because you were the first to show that it is possible to create a really effective free market think tank in a middle or lower income country, which has its own set of challenges. I can remember for the advent of the internet, when my father, Anthony Fisher, was struggling to find contacts in India who might start a replica of the London-based Institute of Economic Affairs in your country. The communications were just too slow and difficult, and he failed. It was not until 1997, 9 years after he died, that CCS showed the world what was possible. I have thought many times since how pleased he would have been to know of your many achievements, and have been grateful to the CCS for the groundbreaking work that you have done, showing that it is possible to wage the war of ideas in India as successfully, if not more so, than in the UK or the US or Australia, for example. But perhaps I should roll back a little and talk about the birth of the world movement to promote classical liberalism and the opportunity and hope that it brings. And for those of you who already know this story, please forgive me for repeating it for the benefit of those who are not so familiar with it, because it really does show that we can each one make a difference. If we each get up and do what we think needs to be done, we can make a difference. Anthony Fisher was born in the UK in 2015. And about 2 years later, his father was killed during the First World War in Gaza. Then his only and younger brother died during the Second World War Battle of Britain. They were flying in the same squadron over the south coast. His brother's plane was shot down in front of my father, and with his parachute on fire, he fell to his death. My father in his own plane could do absolutely nothing to help his younger brother. These events, not surprisingly, had a profound influence on him. He believed they had fought and died for freedom, and after the war, he was haunted by the spectre of communism advancing across Europe, socialism taking over at home. He was searching for a solution, when in 1945 he read the shortened version of The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek in the Reader's Digest. I expect most of you have read it. He sought out Hayek at the London School of Economics, and Hayek advised him strongly against going into politics, but suggested instead that he should start an organization to change public opinion in favor of freedom. It would make academic research into market solutions for economic and social problems much more widely accessible to lay people through what he called the second-hand dealers in ideas. That's mostly you and us now. These were the intellectuals, the teachers, journalists, authors, preachers, and politicians who would promote the ideas more widely and eventually change the climate of opinion, turning what had seemed like the politically impossible into the politically inevitable. He spent the next 5 years setting up a business, which luckily was successful because it generated the funding he needed for his proposed project. And in 1955, the Institute of Economic Affairs opened its door in London to derision from the chattering classes. It was joked that they had employed the only 2 remaining free market economists in the world, and for what purpose? For 20 years plus, they produced rigorous short publications on market solutions to the myriad problems created by years of socialism. But initially, there was little to show for it. Then in 1979, 24 years after the founding of the IEA, Margaret Thatcher came to power. And I couldn't help thinking when I wrote this of the 23 years that you've been going and how much you've been done. And it was 24 years and the IEA had really only just started to achieve. And she soon got working on many of the ideas in those IEA publications, which became a reality. Among other things, rent control, exchange control ended, union powers were curbed, and the majority of the nationalized industries privatized. The UK changed really quickly from being known as the sick man of Europe to being one of the best places to live and do business in the world. Although others were by then also making these cases, the IEA had very much been the first brave, unwavering voice to promote individual freedom and limited government as the only route to peace and prosperity in the world. At the IEA's 30th anniversary dinner in London in 1985, Margaret Thatcher told my father that you were the few and you saved Britain, adding, as only she could, but remember, while the cocks may crow, it's the hen that lays the egg. You can see her saying it there. Once people saw how successful the IEA system had been, they wanted to replicate it in their countries. So in 1981, my father, by then living in the US, set up what is now the Atlas Network to explain to others the principles involved in creating a successful organization to change opinion in favor of freedom. Milton Friedman said at the time, if Anthony had done no more in the think tank world than found the IEA, it would have been enough to put all believers in freedom in his debt. But he then took to breeding think tanks, at first on a retail and then on a wholesale basis. Oops. In 1988, when my father died, there were 34 Atlas partners in only a few higher income countries. Today, there are more than 450 partners in about 100 countries. And although I say it myself as Atlas chairman, I'm a huge fan of what Atlas Network has achieved since then by creating and strengthening a global network of independent civil society organizations that promote individual freedom and remove barriers to human flourishing. Atlas has played a crucial role in either the creation and development, or both, of all these organizations through its academy with advice on every aspect of how an organization can achieve excellence, the 5 million of grants it makes available to partners for their projects every year, the International Liberty Forum that so inspires us, and the prizes to encourage excellence and provide a showcase as to what can be achieved. And you at CCS has been a central part of that story, both in your actual achievements, always at the cutting edge with your ideas and projects, always willing to support Atlas and other partners, and as a role model for those organizations who are earlier in their careers than you are. My father read The Road to Serfdom and it changed his views and his life. And another young man had the same experience many years later, and his name is Parth Shah. Parth is a great example of someone whose life was altered by an idea when he read a book by Ayn Rand, after which he gave up training as a pharmacist and studied philosophy and economics instead, because he realized that if he could change the economic system in India, he could do more for the Indian people than if he became the most brilliant pharmacist in the world. And that, I think, is true for all of us. We all have these opportunities, as I said earlier, to make a difference. Later, he left a comfortable, secure life as an academic in the US to set up the Center for Civil Society in Delhi. And I can remember well those early years, which were always so challenging. But little by little, he, along with a growing team, succeeded in building a truly effective organization through which all of you have since influenced public opinion and won battles for freedom. I think Parth would be happy to agree that Atlas Network played an important role in both the early years of the CCS and as it has matured. And certainly the CCS has been a poster boy for Atlas Network. I wasn't certain when I wrote that whether you can say poster boy anymore. I'm sure you can't in England, whether it's a poster girl. But anyway, you are the poster child for Atlas Network. Through your dozens of significant achievements, you have shown that Hayek's idea of influencing public opinion does work, that ideas do have consequences. I mean, look at my father and look at Parth. Ideas certainly do have consequences. That raising funds outside the US is possible. And most importantly, that increasing freedom is the best way to provide opportunities to the least advantaged. In terms of the concept of moving barriers to opportunity and enterprise, I think you were there well ahead of Atlas Network. You have been talking in these terms. It's been part of your organization ever since you were founded, while Atlas really began to pick up on the idea much more recently. Since you opened your doors, you've been an inspiration to many others of like mind all over the world, but perhaps especially to those in low and middle income countries. You've also been extremely generous in sharing your knowledge and advice to help others develop as successfully as you have. I would be rich if I had got $1 every time I suggested to someone seeking my advice that they should look at the CCS website to learn how you were promoting choice in education. You really have led the world in that area, exploring market solutions and the principles and foundations of a free society through your iPolicy and other student programs, and removing the barriers to opportunity and enterprise, among other things. I tell the story of your removal of the capital requirements for registering a new business every time I want to demonstrate to others how effective a think tank can be. When they say, well, how do these things work? I tell that story, and everyone can understand that if you can remove those barriers, you can give so many people a new opportunity. Additionally, that the CCS was able to become financially self-sufficient, despite the very real difficulties achieving this in middle and lower income countries, which is not to say that fundraising is easy anywhere, but there are degrees of difficulty. I had next intended to talk about some of the most significant CCS achievements, to remind me and you of the many ways you've improved the lives of others since you were founded 23 years ago. But when I began to research them, there were so many that I had no idea where to begin. I can't imagine that any Atlas partner has more or varied achievements than you. Your 4 Templeton Freedom Awards must be a record, because I don't know of any other partner who can boast that. And I think they're particularly impressive because they each cover different areas of your work, including school choice, student outreach, public policy for journalists, and your Javika, probably haven't pronounced that rightly, which has to be one of my favorites. Removing barriers to livelihood, what could be more important than that? A little earlier this year, your work was recognized once again in this area when Prashat Narang and Lawyers for Liberty won the 2020 Asia Think Tank Shark Tank competition for you, and for which you get 10,000 seed funding, which I'm delighted about. This is a legal aid campaign designed to help street vendors to fight the system when their livelihoods are threatened by official harassment. Can you imagine anything more empowering than being able to fight the state for your rights to trade when previously you had no options than to just give them up? And I can tell you, Parth, that I'm about to get in touch with a new organization in Armenia, which is lawyers, and they've just started up the Liberal Lawyers School for Liberty, I think it's called. And they want to do some more practical things later. So I'm going to tell them about your idea so that they can also make use of it, hopefully in Armenia, where the rule of law seems to mean nothing. The success in this area builds upon CCS's long and successful history of working with street vendors to help them secure their livelihoods. Your work was critical to the passage of the Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Act in 2014, which has helped hawkers ever since have a voice in the system. Atlas Network was recently proud to promote the story of Dinesh, a New Delhi street vendor who has become a homeowner and respected member of his community as a result of CCS's efforts to empower vendors like him. I mean, what can make you want to get out of bed more in the morning than as a team you can move these sort of barriers and empower individuals in India? I think I find it, well, everyone knows I get very excited about these things, and I get particularly excited about those practical ideas which have made such a difference to people's lives. Oops. Then I learned that under 4 weeks ago, I mean, literally, virtually yesterday, the Cabinet approved the National Education Policy 2020, which was a big win for CCS, because this change makes a case for the separation of policy-making, regulatory and service delivery functions in education, with the potential to transform education governance. Think of the number of lives you can affect that way. This is something you've advocated for consistently over many years, and it will do much to improve children's education well into the future. At the CCS, you certainly punch above your weight, and I know you will do so increasingly into the future, improving the life chances of millions of people who will never know you, and who you will never know, and who themselves will never know who is responsible for their change in fortune. And that you will multiply that influence many times by acting as an inspiration to other Atlas partners all around the world who follow your example. There couldn't be any better way of spending your life, I think, than doing these things. Maybe Path's got a better idea for the future, but I think what you've been doing in the past is pretty marvelous. And the new school of politics, I think, is wonderful and will have some exciting repercussions as well. Congratulations on your first 23 years. And I know that there is even better to come. As a younger generation at CCS, build upon the experiences and successes of the founder generation. Good luck to all of you. And I'm going to look forward to listening into the rest of your afternoon.